The judge looked at my father's lawyer and said, "Counselor, I'm going to need you to explain to me exactly what legal theory you're working with here, because I've been on this bench for 19 years and I've never seen anything quite like this." My father's lawyer shifted his weight. He straightened his tie, and I sat at the table across from him. Alone, no attorney, just me and a yellow legal pad with 8 pages of notes. And I did not look away. I was 31 years old that morning. I had driven myself to the courthouse in the same car I'd had since grad school, parked in the public lot 3 blocks away, walked in with a travel mug of coffee and a folder I'd organized the night before on my kitchen table. Nobody knew I was there except my neighbor, who'd agree to water my plants if things ran long. That was the whole of my support system. And I thought, sitting there under the fluorescent lights while the lawyer shuffled papers, about the afternoon 23 years ago when my parents drove away from a rest stop off I-40 outside of Amarillo and left me standing next to a vending machine with 40 cents in my pocket and a backpack that had my name written in permanent marker on the tag, Cecily. Age 8. I remember the car, a silver Dodge Caravan, one of the back windows held up by a piece of duct tape because my brother had pushed too hard on it the year before. I remember watching it pull back onto the highway. I stood there for a long time waiting for it to loop back around. Rest stops have loops sometimes. You can exit and come right back. I knew that. I had watched for it. The van didn't loop back. I sat down on the curb next to a trash can and I ate the granola bar that was in the side pocket of my backpack, a kind I didn't even like. Oats and dried cranberry, the kind my mother bought in bulk. And I watched cars come and go. A trucker. A family with a dog hanging out the window. 2 motorcycles. I counted things because counting helped and because I did not know what else to do. Eventually, a woman came out of the restroom, looked at me sitting there, and asked if I was okay. I told her I didn't know. She called the police from her cell phone while I sat beside her on the curb. She bought me a bottle of water from the vending machine without asking if I wanted it. She just came back and handed it to me. Her name was something I can't remember now, but she had gray streaks in her hair and she smelled like floral laundry detergent, and she didn't leave until the police cruiser pulled in. The officer who came was a woman. She crouched down so she was at my level, which I remember noticing. Adults didn't usually do that. She asked me my name. I told her. She asked me my address. I told her that too. 4412 Oleander Drive, Lubbock, Texas. The house with the broken mailbox flag that my father was always saying he would fix. She asked me my parents' names. I told her those as well. I told her my brother's name. I told her our phone number. I had memorized it at age 5 because my mother had made all of us memorize it, which I thought of even then as deeply ironic given everything. The officer took all of it down. She took me to the station. I got a sandwich from a vending machine, peanut butter crackers, and a juice box. A woman from Child Protective Services came and sat with me in a room with a fish tank and a bin of Legos, and she asked me what had happened. I told her the truth. My parents had told me to go to the bathroom, and when I came out, the van was gone. I believed, still, at that point, that it had been an accident. It was not an accident. I learned that slowly, across weeks and months, in the way that children learn terrible things. Not all at once, but in pieces, each one a little harder than the last. I learned it from the silence on the other end of the phone line when the officer tried to reach my parents. I learned it from the fact that nobody came. I learned it from the CPS caseworker, a man named Barry who wore the same brown cardigan every time I saw him and had a habit of rubbing the back of his neck when he was about to say something difficult. "Your parents," he said one afternoon, rubbing the back of his neck, "have told us that they don't know what happened to you?" I was 8 years old and I already understood what that meant. My parents had filed a missing child report. They had described me to the police in Lubbock as a troubled child who had a history of running away. They had told the school I had been sent to live with relatives in another state. And they had, within 10 months of my disappearance, collected $58,000 from a missing child insurance policy they had taken out 2 years before I was left at that rest stop. I didn't know about the insurance policy for a long time. That part came later. What I knew then was that nobody came. My name was in the system. My address was in the system. The police in Lubbock knew my address, and still nobody came. Barry explained it to me once, years later when I was old enough to understand the bureaucratic geography of it. Jurisdiction. Interdepartment communication failures, a case that fell into a gap between two county systems. He didn't say it to excuse it. He said it the way you describe a car accident. Here is the sequence of events. Here is where it went wrong. This is what it produced. What it produced was me, in foster care, age 8, in the Texas Panhandle. I was placed with 2 families in the first year. The first was fine, not unkind, just overwhelmed. A household with 4 other children and not enough hours in the day. The second was harder. I won't go into it. I'll just say that, by the time I left there, I had developed a habit of making myself very small and very quiet, which took years to unlearn. The third placement was a woman named Agatha. Agatha was 61 years old. She had retired from 30 years of teaching high school English and had started taking foster placements because, as she told me on the first night, her house was too quiet and she had too many books. She lived in a yellow house in a town called Wheeler, Texas, population 1,200. 1 stoplight, a grain elevator visible from her back porch. She had a cat named Morrison, who tolerated no nonsense, and a garden that grew more tomatoes than one person could reasonably eat, and a bookshelf in every room, including the bathroom. The night I arrived, she made spaghetti. She poured me a glass of milk without asking if I wanted it, same as the woman at the rest stop with the water, and I thought about that later, how some people just understood what you needed without requiring you to ask. We ate at a table by the window. She asked me if I liked to read. I said I didn't know, I hadn't done much of it. She said that was fine, we'd figure out what I liked. That was the beginning. Agatha had been married once, a long time ago. Her husband, a man she described as very good and very funny, had died of a heart attack at 53. They'd never had children, not for lack of wanting. She had an album she showed me once, a worn green binder with photographs, the 2 of them at what looked like a state fair, at a graduation ceremony, on a dock somewhere with fishing poles and genuinely terrible hats. She laughed showing me the hats. She started the foster placements after he died. She said the house needed noise. I was her 6th placement. The others had all moved on, some back to family, some to adoption, one to another county. She told me about them occasionally, with the same warmth she applied to everything. No hierarchy, no favorites. But I was there. I stayed. I don't know exactly when I stopped waiting to be moved again. It happened gradually, the way trust happens, not in a single moment, but in accumulations. The way she remembered I hated cilantro and picked it out of things before she served them. The way she came to my school plays and sat in the front row and clapped embarrassingly hard. The way she bought me a dictionary when I was 12 because she said every person should own one and wrote my name inside the cover in her careful teacher's cursive. By the time I was 14, she had started adoption proceedings. By the time I was 15, she was my mother. Legally. Fully. Every piece of paper said so. And she was. In every way that mattered, she was. Agatha taught me to drive in the parking lot of the Wheeler First Baptist Church on Sunday mornings when no one was using it. She proofread my college essays at the kitchen table with a red pen and a cup of tea. She drove me to Lubbock, of all places, to drop me off at Texas Tech, and she cried in the car on the way back, which she told me later and which I have never found funny. I got a scholarship. I majored in accounting. I worked at a restaurant on weekends and saved almost everything. Agatha had set aside a small fund, money from her teaching pension, put away over years, to help with what the scholarship didn't cover. She never made it feel like charity. She called it the college account. Same way you'd say the grocery fund, just a practical thing. I graduated and got a job at an accounting firm in Austin. I was 22 years old and I owned 3 pieces of furniture and a coffee maker that was held together with conviction. And I was fine. I was genuinely fine. I called Agatha every Sunday. I drove up to Wheeler for Thanksgiving and Christmas and her birthday in April, and I sat in her kitchen eating her tomato soup and arguing about books, and it was enough. It was more than enough. She was diagnosed with congestive heart failure when I was 27. She managed it well, for a while. Medication. Diet changes. She complained about the diet changes constantly and with great eloquence. She gave up salt and never fully forgave the medical establishment for it. She kept gardening, kept reading, kept up her subscription to 3 different magazines that she insisted on calling periodicals. She was fine. Then she wasn't. She died on a Thursday in March in the house in Wheeler in her own bed, which she had specified she wanted and which we managed to arrange. I was there. I had taken the week off work and driven up when it became clear things were moving quickly. I sat with her and we talked. Or she talked and I listened, and at some point she fell asleep and didn't wake up. She was 78. Her lawyer called me 2 weeks after the funeral. I had known, in the vague way you know things you don't look at directly, that Agatha had some assets. The house, the pension income, savings she had been careful with for decades. I had not known the shape of it exactly because it had never felt like my business to ask. The lawyer, a measured man who spoke in the tone of someone accustomed to delivering information that changed people's lives, walked me through it. The house in Wheeler paid off, valued at approximately $190,000. Investment accounts she had maintained and almost never touched. A small inheritance of her own from an aunt, invested well and left alone for 30 years. Life insurance. The total came to a little over $1.4 million. She left all of it to me. There was a letter with the will, handwritten on her stationery, the cream paper with the small yellow flowers in the corner, and I am not going to tell you what it said because it belongs to me. What I will tell you is that I sat in the lawyer's office and read it twice, and then I folded it exactly on its original creases, and I put it in my bag, and I walked to my car, and I sat there for 45 minutes before I was able to drive. I want to be clear about something. The money was not the thing that undid me. It was the letter. The money was practical. The letter was everything else. I drove back to Austin. I went back to work. I contacted the lawyer about next steps for the estate. I handled things because handling things is what Agatha had taught me, and I was not going to stop now. 3 months later, I received a certified letter from a law firm in Lubbock. My biological parents were suing me for the full inheritance. The letter was 6 pages long and dense with legal language. I read it 3 times before I understood what I was looking at. Their argument, as best I could parse it, was that as my original biological parents, they had a continued legal and moral claim to any assets that passed through my hands, including inherited assets, particularly given that, and this part I had to read 4 times, they had suffered significant financial and emotional damages as a result of my disappearance. Their disappearance. They were describing the afternoon they left me at a rest stop in Amarillo as my disappearance. I set the letter down. I made a cup of coffee. I stood at my kitchen window looking at the parking lot of my apartment complex for a long time. Then I called the lawyer who'd handled Agatha's estate and asked him to recommend a litigator. He gave me a name. The litigator's retainer was $15,000. I had the money. I had considerably more than that, now, but I sat with it overnight anyway. And somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up and lay in the dark, thinking about Agatha's letter, and about the fact that she had worked for 30 years and saved carefully and chosen of all the people in her life to leave what she had built to me. And I thought about a 6-page letter from 2 people who had driven away from a rest stop and not looked back. And I thought, I'm going to do this myself. I am an accountant by training, not a lawyer. What I am is thorough. Agatha made me thorough. She had a saying she picked up from her years in the classroom. Measure twice, cut once. I had applied it to spreadsheets and tax filings, and I applied it now. I spent 4 months preparing. I read the Texas Estates Code in sections, nights and weekends, making notes in the margins of a legal pad. I contacted the Texas State Bar's referral service and paid for 2 one-hour consultations with a probate attorney, not to hire him, just to ask questions and confirm I was reading things correctly. I filed my own response to the suit. I made a timeline. I gathered documents. The documents were the part that took the longest and the part that mattered the most. I contacted the Randall County Sheriff's Department and filed a records request for the original incident report from the day I was found at the rest stop. It took 6 weeks and one follow-up letter. I contacted Texas DPS, the Department of Family and Protective Services, for records from my time in foster care. This took longer. 3 months, a formal request, a brief period where I thought they'd lost the files entirely, and then a thick envelope arrived, and I sat down on my kitchen floor and read through it for the first time. My case file. Barry's notes. The placement records. The results of every attempt to contact my family. Every documented detail of what had happened to me and who had known and when. I requested the insurance records through a civil discovery process that took a subpoena and cost me the price of a filing fee and a significant amount of patience. But they came. And what they showed was that my parents had collected $58,000 on a missing child policy in the year following my disappearance. That they had provided signed attestations to the insurance company stating they had no knowledge of my whereabouts. That this had occurred after local Levick police had, in fact, been contacted by Randall County regarding a child matching my description found at a rest stop, and that their records showed an attempted follow-up call to my parents' listed number that had gone unreturned. I am an accountant. I know how to build a picture from numbers and documents. I know how to present it clearly. I know how to make sure every piece connects to the next. I made a binder, tabbed, organized chronologically. I made a second copy. The morning I drove to the courthouse in Lubbock, I had both binders in the passenger seat. My biological parents were there. I had not seen them since I was 8 years old. My mother was in her late 50s now. My father had gone gray. They looked like ordinary people, which I had known intellectually, but still registered as a surprise. Their lawyer, a man in a Navy suit who had the practiced confidence of someone who believed he was walking into a simple case, introduced himself to me across the hallway. He did not ask if I was represented. He assumed I was not there in a professional capacity. He was the kind of wrong that doesn't know it's wrong yet. The judge was a woman who had been on the Texas bench since before I'd started high school. She had a reputation, which I had researched, for impatience with poorly prepared cases and for asking questions directly. She looked at my binder when I submitted it as evidence. She looked at their filing. She looked at me. "Ms. Vance," she said, "that's my last name now. Legally, Agatha's name, the name I chose. You're representing yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. She nodded once and turned to opposing counsel. "Counselor," she said, "I'm going to need you to explain to me exactly what legal theory you're working with here." He tried. I'll give him that. He made an argument about parental legacy, about blood relation, about moral entitlement. He used phrases like natural family unit and lifelong bond. The judge listened with the expression of someone who has heard many things in 19 years on the bench and is deciding which category to put this in. Then she asked him about the $58,000. He hadn't known about the $58,000. I could see it on his face, a fractional hesitation, a recalibration. He hadn't done the discovery that I had done. He had, I think, assumed this would be straightforward. The plaintiff's client, the judge said, collected a life insurance disbursement for a missing child who was, in fact, in the state foster care system and whose location was, at least in part, known to law enforcement. Can you explain how that squares with their current claim of injury and loss? He could not explain it. He tried twice and could not. The judge turned to me. She asked me to walk her through my documentation. I walked her through it. I had practiced. I had notes. I didn't rush. Agatha had always said that when you know something thoroughly, you don't need to perform knowing it. You can just be still and tell the truth. I was still. I told the truth. At the end, the judge called a brief recess. When she came back, she dismissed the suit entirely. She cited lack of legal standing. My parents' parental rights had been legally terminated when Agatha adopted me, which meant they had no claim on my inherited assets whatsoever, which any attorney who had reviewed the case file would have discovered in approximately 20 minutes. She noted that the suit appeared to have been filed without adequate investigation into the underlying legal facts. She also noted, for the record, that the documentation I had submitted regarding the original incident and subsequent insurance collection had been referred to the appropriate county authorities for review. That last part she said looking at my parents' lawyer. Then she looked at my parents. They were the ones who looked away first. I drove back to Austin that night. I stopped at a diner outside of Waco because I was tired and needed to eat something real. I ordered chicken fried steak because it felt like the right choice, and I sat in a booth by the window and I thought about Agatha. I thought about the dictionary she had bought me, the red pen she'd used on my college essays, the sound of her voice reading out loud in the kitchen on Saturday mornings. She had a habit of reading things she liked out loud, pieces of books or magazine articles or the occasional poem, as if sharing them with the room even when no one else was there. I thought about the fact that I had her name, that I had chosen it, that it was mine on every document, every piece of paper, every filing I had made in that courthouse in Lubbock, where the people who were supposed to raise me had tried, one more time, to take something from me. They hadn't. I paid my bill. I left a good tip because I always do. I got in my car and I drove home. In the spring, I established a small fund through a community foundation in Wheeler. It supports the Wheeler Public Library's children's collection, new books every year, because Agatha believed that every child should have access to more books than they could possibly read and the freedom to work their way through them however they wanted. The librarian who runs the program sends me a list each year of what she's ordered. Last year, it included a very good dictionary. I still have mine, the one with my name inside the cover, in careful teacher's cursive. There's a note in the front that I've read so many times the fold is soft. I won't tell you what it says, but I'll tell you this. It starts with the word Cecily, which is my name, the one I was born with, and it ends with the word home, and everything in between is hers and mine and no one else's. Some things belong only to the people who earned them, and some things, the real ones, the ones that last, were never about the money at all. I think about the granola bar a lot, oats and dried cranberry, a kind I didn't even like, and I ate every bite of it standing next to a trash can at a rest stop off I-40 because it was the only thing I had. 8 years old, watching the highway for a silver van that wasn't coming back. I didn't know it then, but that afternoon was the first test of something I'd spend the rest of my life building. The ability to stay upright when the people who were supposed to hold you let go. You don't learn that in a classroom. You learn it the hard way, in parking lots and courthouses and late nights reading legal documents you were never trained to understand. You learn it because you don't have the option not to. Agatha taught me the rest, not by telling me who to be, but by being someone worth watching. She was honest in ways that cost her something. She'd mark up my essays read all over and hand them back without apology, because she respected me enough not to pretend the work was finished when it wasn't. She was curious in a way that never stopped, reading out loud in an empty kitchen just because she'd found a sentence she liked, and she was steady. Not because nothing ever went wrong, but because she had decided, somewhere along the way, that steadiness was a choice you made every morning, not a feeling you waited to have. I made the same choice the night I decided to represent myself. I won't pretend I wasn't afraid. I was. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a cup of coffee gone cold, and I thought about every reason it could go badly. But I also knew what I had. I had 4 months of preparation. I had Barry's case notes and the insurance records and the incident report from Randall County. I had the truth, documented, organized, tabbed. And I had the thing Agatha gave me that no one could subpoena. The understanding that doing right by yourself is not arrogance. It is the minimum you owe to everyone who ever believed in you. What my biological parents did was the result of a long chain of choices. They chose to drive away. They chose to lie. They chose to collect money on a child who was very much alive and in a system that was trying to find her. And then, 23 years later, they chose to walk into a courthouse and try to take something that was never theirs. Every step followed from the one before it. That is not a spiritual law or a cosmic punishment. It is just how actions work. They accumulate. They compound. They eventually stand in a room with a judge who has 19 years of experience and a binder full of documents she has not seen before. My choices accumulated too. Every late night with the legal pad, Every records request I followed up on when the first letter went unanswered. Every time I told the truth about what had happened to me, without softening it to make other people more comfortable. None of that was dramatic. Most of it was quiet and slow and unglamorous, but it added up to something that held. I have Agatha's dictionary on my desk right now. My name is still inside the cover in her handwriting. I look at it sometimes when a problem feels bigger than I know how to handle, and I think about a woman who bought a dictionary for a 12-year-old she barely knew because she thought every person should own one. That was who she was. And because of who she was, I know who I am. That is the only inheritance that matters. Everything else was just paperwork.